Once again, guys, thanks for everyone who's jumped on the phone or on the call tonight. We're going to cover a bunch of stuff here as quickly as possible. I know we're all busy in the season with families, jobs, and baseball, so we're going to cut to the chase here and get going. Just to start out, some general housekeeping items I want to touch on tonight. We certainly want to thank everybody for all their flexibility over the last 2 weeks with a lot of weather issues. We were hoping that we'd have a better season weather-wise, and unfortunately we haven't gotten off to that start. So thank you for everybody who's rearranged schedules, who's checked their schedules and kept up to date with their availability, which we'll touch on in a minute here. And for guys that have moved around last minute, we really appreciate your efforts because we know we ask a lot of you guys, especially when these weather days turn for the worse, and we do appreciate that. That being said, guys, let's please keep the availability up to date. Turnbacks are only going to slow down the already challenging assigning process. It's very difficult for Alex and I when we're trying to move things around and we're getting games last minute, which are happening all of the time now, when we assign somebody who shows up available in the system and then we get an email response back saying that they weren't. So please, we're asking, just make sure you keep up with availability. Just to make this whole process run a lot smoother. Guys, any changes or cancellations that you have, please email us. I know a lot of you guys text or call, which is great. Sometimes the problem is Alex and I are both traveling later in the week when a lot of these issues come up. At least one of us are usually at the computer. Our schedule's pretty much coincide where Alex might be at the computer while I'm on the road or vice versa. So, just make sure that you guys follow up with emails if you do call and text, just so we can make sure that we get all those changes in the system immediately and accurately as we possibly can. But one thing we are coming across, guys, please send the emails to either cmarshall@umpires.org or alex@umpires.org. Emails that are being sent to the wrong places, once again, it's just going to slow down the process and just make the job that much more difficult. So any emails or any guys that are sending emails to assigner@umpires.org or macassigner@umpires.org, please don't send them to those two email addresses. Send them directly to Alex or myself. Also, don't call the MAC hotline in case you have an emergency. Alex and I always have our phones with us, and we answer, if not immediately, we call right back. So any of these last-minute emergencies, and they come up, we completely understand. Just make sure you guys call us directly. Once again, we don't want to slow down that process, especially if we have to make a quick change last minute and find some umpires. And a few of you out there, have probably seen us try to find umpires a couple hours before games or mornings of games or changing sites. These things are happening all the time. So if there's an emergency where you have an issue with work, family, whatever it may be, call us directly so we can jump on that right away.
Chris, it's Alex.
Guys,
Guys, the big thing about that is just understand, we know that stuff for MAC and stuff for UCU is in the same system. Understand which conference you're working on that day and follow those procedures. So John, if you're working for MAC, if you're working for Region 20, Capitals, Colonial, MEAC, and the process, whatever John's process is to call into the MAC hotline, do that if it's his game, if it's that game. If it's a game that I assign or Chris assigns, for UCU, follow our process. So try not to get those two confused because the processes are quite a bit different. And so we'll go from there.
Thanks. I think I left that piece out the last time around this phone call too, so I'm glad you had jumped in with that. Let's make sure that when we get to the schools, guys, that we reach out to somebody there. I know a lot of us are used to just going in locker rooms when we're lucky enough to have them, or you're at a site where maybe they rub the baseballs. You don't have to worry about it, which I think is most sites now. But make sure you alert somebody that you're there. We've had a couple of cases where teams or coaches just don't know that you're there, and they're either calling or emailing to make sure that you guys are on site, and we know that you are. So just touch base with somebody when you show up. Let somebody know on the way in, whether it's a coach, administrator, site guy. Let them know you're there. And in the cases where you guys are changing in the parking lot, walk up to the field. Just let them know you're there and you're ready to go. And also, I think we all do this anyways, but just make sure you reach out to your partners day before, especially for umpires possibly working with somebody who's new, maybe not aware of a certain site, where you're going to be parking, all those small things that sometimes we forget about. Let's just make sure we're all on the same page. We've had a few halted game issues come up here recently, so we want to touch on some of the regulations and some of the conference policies on that. If you work in the NEAC, all games are regulation games. There's no halted games, all right? For Region 19 or the GSAC.
So, Chris, yeah, let me chime in because this is a little bit complicated.
Okay, you can take this.
As some of you guys know, Region 19 is made up of the GSAC and the EAC. So that's the New Jersey schools and the Pennsylvania schools. And the conference that we kind of get the most regulation out of is specifically the GSAC in Region 19. So what we're getting now, and I had sent out an email to anybody who's working in this conference, if you're working a GSAC conference game in Region 19, they're going to go halted game in the first game of the series and then regulation game in the last game of the series. And a series can be made up of 2 games in one day, or it can be made up of a game on a Tuesday one week and a game on a Thursday next week. So the key to all this, guys, is not that for Region 19 or the GSAC what the rule is. I honestly, it's so confusing. I don't expect you guys to know it. I don't really expect you guys to know much about halted game and whether a conference uses it at any level or any conference. The point of all of this is we just have to know at the plate meeting. So it always seems easy to gloss over it. The sky looks great, whatever it may be. Just make sure all of these different things that we're asking at the plate meeting and getting a clarification, just so everybody's on the same page. All the umpires, all of the participants. Obviously, there's one series, conference series. All 4 of the conferences use the halted game in all of the games except the last one, which becomes regulation. But then Division I non-conference, all Division III, all JUCO. Just get a clarification at the plate meeting. That way everybody's on the same page.
Perfect. And, guys, some of you may remember last year we had, I think, one of our first or second conference calls. We did have an issue where 2 teams played. The umpire crew did not specify or ask the coaches before the beginning of the game if it was halted. There ended up being a tie situation. And there was a lot of confusion after the game had ended due to darkness. Did one team win? The other team thought that it was a tie. So just to clear up all of that confusion, like Alex said, just ask and make sure we have some clarification on what they're doing at the plate meeting. That way you're covered and everyone's on the same page. This doesn't necessarily have to do with halted game, but, guys, the second game of doubleheaders, head coach does not have to come out to the plate meeting, but obviously for the first game, and if you're playing a single game, let's make sure the head coach is out there. And ironically enough, I worked a game yesterday, and I know the head coach for this team, he did not come out. So the first question I had was, where's Joe? Joe was sick, so I had to make sure that this guy who was coming out now was going to be the head coach. He's the guy that we would be dealing with for the rest of the day as the head coach of that team. I want to touch on some weather issues, guys, and let's be honest here. Weather is probably one of the most difficult things that we have to deal with in umpiring, and it's not an easy thing to have to deal with. But let's make sure that at the start of the game, if you have a day where there's going to be some weather issues, just discuss any of those potential issues that may occur during the day, okay? Specifically lightning. So we have to know the NCAA policy, which is a lightning strike within 8 miles. Obviously, we're pulling players and teams off the field, and then we wait 30 minutes, and with every additional strike, the clock restarts. Now, we also have to know, does the campus or the conference have a different policy? So if you have weather in the area, potential for thunderstorms and lightning, we want to make sure we have those answers either before we get to the plate speak to some administrator on site, or we make sure that we have that answer at the plate meeting, okay? Because we want to know if their policy is different. We ran into a situation where I believe the policy, or one of the school's policy, was a 10-mile.
So the policy can never be less stringent, guys. Just to keep that clear, they can't say they want their policy to be 5 miles.
Yeah, and then obviously we're going to err on the side of caution on this, because we all know how dangerous and that lightning can be, and I don't think any of us want to be in a situation where we're out there and have this come up. So it's also good to know if they do have a lightning detector on site, or a siren, or whatever it may be. So these are all questions that we need answered prior to the game. We know that everybody has cell phones, but let's be aware of who has a phone or who has access to radar. What do we have to treat the field? I mean, that's one thing I always wanted to know. I mean, because that may determine whether we stop, we tarp, or we just keep on playing, knowing that there's no rakes, there's no one that can work on the field, there's no turfist, no drying agent, nothing. So these are all things that you need to have and be aware of when you're dealing with weather. And it's funny, this next piece of information, or the thing I'm going to say is let's actually know when the sun's going to go down. And there's a coach up in my area that always knew it, and I think one time I was on the field and actually told him what the time before he could even tell me. So know what the time is, when the sun sets, and make sure that you're able to set a drop-dead time, especially if you guys go into a lightning or weather delay. And we want to make sure that we're not going to start an inning that we can't finish. And I think we had a situation on conference this week where the umpire crew did a good job. They went as long as they could. And when they found and deemed that it was not safe to be on the field, that's when they stopped the game. All right, so not easy to deal with, guys, but this is all a lot of information that you guys have to have at your disposal when making these decisions. And
I think it's important to note, I think the reason that we're bringing up the specific campus or conference policies is that some campuses will make a rule or have a rule in their facility that they stop within 10 miles or they stop within 12 miles. And when their trainer gets that notification, they're going to want to stop. But the problem we ran into yesterday was everyone's under the assumption that we're using 8 miles. Nothing else is discussed. And now the trainer comes running on the field in the bottom of the 8th inning with her team up 2-1 and the tying run on second and saying, oh, we use 10 miles here. And obviously we all want to, err on the caution, but I think we understand what we opened ourselves up to here. And now, of course, the umpires said to the trainer, look, you didn't tell us you were using 10 miles. We're using 8 miles. When that thing goes under 8, you let us know. And that's a very, very uncomfortable situation, which could have obviously been alleviated by just understanding what their policy is for. So, again, any campus can set a lightning rule kind of within reason. So if it's 10, if it's 12, all of those are reasonable, but everybody should be on the same playing field, again, before we start, so that gamesmanship, which I'm not sure if that was or it wasn't, but there shouldn't be any chance for anyone to accuse anyone of that either. So if everyone would have known yesterday that it was 10 miles, we would have just stopped, and it would have been 10 miles. But, it can get a little hairy if we don't have clarification kind of at the start.
All right, next thing, guys, loud cursing on the field. And this is, before I really get into this, I know it's something that the NCAA has talked about, players or coaches just screaming profanity out, whether they're upset with themselves or whatever the situation. In most cases, it's not even directed towards another player or an umpire. Say they ground out or get out or strike out, whatever it may be, and they scream out profanity. So, Alex and I have heard from some athletic directors and conferences, and obviously some teams are a little more sensitive to this than others, but there has been enough contact or people getting in contact with us that are not happy with this loud profanity and cursing that's happening on the field. So guys, we have to address it. and warn them not to do it. But let's not over officiate this and look to throw people out because of it. It's an issue, and it's certainly something that the NCAA wants to eliminate in our game. Pardon me. But just because somebody screams out an F-bomb, let's just not look to throw them out of the game. Let's warn them, say, hey, man, you can't do that. Talk to the coach, get the coach's help, say, hey, I understand there's frustration, he's upset, but we can't have him screaming and yelling loud profanity, loud enough for the crowd and kids and everyone on site to hear. All right, so let's just do our best to address that in a calm, cool, collected way, not to escalate it or make it worse, and knowing that there's probably going to be a little bit of pushback on that. I mean, I'm sure there's some coaches out there that don't see a problem with it. So however you can just deliver the message and say, hey, we can't have that. There's kids and women and people around here that don't want to hear this, nor does the NCAA. Just deliver that message, okay? It's very important to a lot of people. And I think we may get to a point somewhere down the line where maybe there's some rules and policies to follow. But for now, let's just try to warn them and get them to stop that. I want to touch on bench jockeying again. I know we've talked about this a lot. But let's think about this, and we talked about this with the NJAC umpires a couple nights ago or last week. Anything that's directed towards the other team, let's acknowledge it, okay? And sometimes maybe just looking over at them and say, hey, guys, we're not doing that today, okay? It's not the warning right from the start. So if you think it's something that isn't something that you need to warn immediately, just acknowledge it. Say, guys, not today. Let's not do that. Let's keep it positive, however you want to phrase it. If it's really that bad, then warn them. And obviously, we know finally we'll eject somebody. But it certainly has to be addressed. We want the players to have fun, and we all know that a lot of teams are louder than others, and sometimes it's a game to say or to see who can say the dumbest or funniest thing in their mind on the bench, and it gets annoying sometimes. But when we hear something that crosses the line, once again, let's address that, warn and eject if necessary. And then also, when we talk about intimidating actions like body motions or pointing to parts of your body to intimidate other players and other teams, that's also something that we want to make sure we address and that we don't allow that to happen. And as always, let's use the coaches. Let's use them to help. Certainly just saying, hey, Jim, Ron, whoever it is, help me out with this. I'm not looking to throw anybody out today, but these are comments from your bench that we can't have. So I think most of us are doing a pretty good job of it, but let's just acknowledge it and keep working hard at it. I spoke with a couple of coaches and ADs today, and I've talked to a few, over the last week or so. And I think sometimes, guys, we are kind of our own worst enemies out there. So think about this. It's better to remain silent and be thought of a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. And some of us have a knack of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. And think about the words that are coming out of your mouth before you say them. So if you have any doubt, just remain silent. You can't quote silence. And I think some of us, sometimes, whether we want to have the quick, quirky response back or we want to over-explain things, sometimes it's best just not to say anything, okay? Because a lot of us, myself included, in my past career, I've said things I know just made things worse. So you can't quote silence. That's really the best thing to think about. I'm getting reports of some umpires responding to coaches in an aggressive way. We can't have that, guys. We can't match the emotional level or the volume of the coaches and players that are yelling or talking to us. So, and let's not let our emotions get the best of you. And don't feel that you have to respond to every comment. Sometimes some of these coaches out there are saying things to you just to egg you on, to get you to respond, to get you to play part of the game. So once again, if you're silent and don't respond to them, you can't argue with somebody who doesn't say something back to you. Right? So once again, I think the best way to approach this is address that situation when you need to, warn, and I think a lot of us are doing a pretty good job, a much better job of warning people. And then when we get to the point where we have to eject somebody, make sure it's a professional and non-emotional way of handling it. Don't make it worse, okay? Next topic, guys, is fraternization. And, you know, I've seen some games here in the last couple of weeks, and I've received some reports. And, you know, it's kind of bothering me a little bit, and I know some players and coaches and conference administrators are not happy with it either. We're just seeing umpires that are talking way too much to players and coaches on the field. And they, like I said, they're complaining about it. And I can tell you that it's a subject that comes up every single month on one of our coordinator phone calls, where these regional evaluators are seeing umpires across the country that just are talking too much. So just think about a couple of these things. I mean, if you think that a coach or a player is going to give you a break on a call because you're the cool umpire, you've been talking to them all game long, you're mistaken. And they're going to yell at you and give you grief just as much as anybody, whether you talk to them or not. So thinking that you're making a friendship and you're the player's best friend, when emotion and plays come into play here, they're not going to catch you a break just because you're talking to them. They're still going to argue. They're still going to complain calls no matter how much you talk. I mean, if anything, guys, you're going to open yourself up to the comments that we've probably heard in the past. Like maybe if you weren't paying attention to the game and you weren't talking to my players, you might get some calls right. And I had a specific quote from a coach in an evaluation. This was the quote, guys. This guy could probably be a good umpire if he could just keep his mouth shut and not talk the whole game. And that's in a nutshell, guys, that's the problem. So we can't have that. I want you guys to be friendly, approachable, say hellos, answer questions when they ask. But what we can't have is umpires that are talking throughout the whole game or positioning themselves close to players during conferences, half innings, whatever it may be. Find a spot in the field, and if you know you're that umpire that likes to talk and is overly friendly, then my suggestion is just go find somewhere where nobody is, and if you have to talk to yourself, then I guess that's better than talking to people on the field. All right, so let's really work hard on this, and if you think you're one of those guys who talks too much, then certainly listen to what I'm saying. Let's do our best just to cut down on this because it's being noticed and, you know, people aren't very happy about it. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been out and seen a lot of games and just some overall observations. Warren Bumpus has been out a bunch as well. I know Alex has seen games we've all seen. So just some overall observations and things that we've seen that I want to point out to you guys tonight. I'm still seeing on reverse rotation situations a lot of guys that aren't slashing immediately when the ball leaves the infield. I know we've talked about this a lot, but it's vital that when that batted ball goes through the infield, when you have a reverse rotation situation and it's not trouble that you have to go out, you have to get into the diamond. You can't swing outside and then try to chase the batter runner to second because he's going to beat you. I mean, even the fastest guys on staff are going to get beat. And I'm seeing a lot of guys when they're slashing to the outside. Once again, guys, we got to get into that cutout and get ahead of them. Every time. I mean, I'm seeing too many situations where guys are kind of slashing the outside. They want to rim a little bit. If that play breaks down and we have a throwback to first, you're in no position to call that from the outside. It's going to be a complete guess. So please, I really want to see us get better at this. So reverse rotations, anytime the batted ball leaves the infield is you one, get inside, not slashing to the out. Strike zones, guys, and this is also from our national evaluators as well, have been pretty good. But I think the problem that we're seeing, and we see, I think, you know, most years and most seasons, that we have to be a little more consistent on the outside corner for left-handed batters. And myself included, I know that's a pitch in a zone that I've always had to work at, and a lot of us do. But I'm receiving some videos of pitches for left-handed batters that are just, you know, way outside. And I think, you know what, I don't think you guys are calling it because you're grabbing pitches. I think you just have to recalibrate your strike zones, and I think in most cases you probably think it's a strike. So, you know, let's just make sure that our head position is in the same spot for both right-handed and left-handed batters, and that we're really keying on that catcher's glove and having a good feel for what that outside corner is for lefties, okay? So, you know, the best way to try to figure this out, if you don't see video, is talk to your partners. I mean, if you know this is an issue that you have, and I've asked my partners before, half inning, call them in, say, hey, did I grab? Did I go too wide? Am I good on the outside? I mean, they're going to give you that instant feedback right away. And if you can make that change and adjustment in game, obviously your game's going to go much smoother. I think we're doing a good job recording trips, guys, really. In all the games that I've watched, plate umpires are recording their mechanics and addressing and telling the teams how many conferences they've used. It's all been good. This is really just kind of review, because once again, we're doing a good job of it. But in two-man system, the plate guy has to do all the recording. I'm not necessarily looking for base umpires to have a card with them. If you want to, you're comfortable with it, that's fine, but you already have the clock. You have the stopwatch. So plate man should be able to take care of that in a two-man. Once again, in the three-man, plate umpire and U1 would be the ones recording the visits, because U3 has the stopwatch. But we're doing a really good job at that in the games that I've seen, so let's keep up the good work on that. For 120 seconds, I've seen some umpires do a really good job of giving the hand signals for, 30 seconds left and 15. But let's position those base umpires in a position where the plate umpire can actually see them. And once again, plate umpires, let's do a better job of just acknowledging and picking up that third base umpire with the stopwatch, so you can have a general idea of how much time is left on the clock. And honestly, I have not seen any situations, I think, where your teams are running long here. So we seem to be communicating well. But let's just look at each other, get some eye contact, and have a better idea of how much time is actually left. Offensive trips, guys. Now, this seems to be the hot topic lately, and I've talked to Randy and the NCAA a bunch of times. And unfortunately, with our rule set and the way that they were written up this past year, there's a lot of situations that are not specifically addressed as far as what the offense can do in some of these situations. I think the overall theme in all these I'm going to talk about right now, none of these are going to be charge conferences. But we have to be aware of what the offense is doing, and obviously whether or not there's a defensive change or not. So the first one, guys, if the defense initiates a conference, the offense meets, followed by a pitching change, it's still going to be a charged offensive conference. I know this has been questioned a couple times. I've had a couple coaches ask me this. So that offense has to wait for the pitching change before they leave their positions. So that will be a conference, a charged offensive conference, if they meet before the pitching change is made. Now, we've had situations where offensive base coaches have left their position and ran clear across the diamond to go speak to their head coach or other people on their bench. As crazy as that seems right now, guys, that is not a charged conference. It's not in our rule book. It's not specifically addressed. The suggestion would be is that base coach, or maybe we communicate to a base coach who does something like that he returns to his coach's box before the pitcher is ready to start pitching again. So maybe when there's one pitch left or whatever the case may be, we get him back. But as of right now, that is not a charged conference. Same thing with batters returning to their dugout, on deck hitters, all those things. As long as that third base coach or first base coach does not come down to talk to them specifically and leave their position, or they go to one of those coaches, if they just go back to the dugout, presently where we stand here, it's not a charged conference. So I have a feeling going into next year, a lot of these things are going to be addressed, but as of now, they're not conferences. And I've worked hard to try to get answers on these, but we're just not there yet. We've had a couple situations with a backswing contact on balls that have been hit to the infield. Two situations that have come up. One actually happened where there was a ball that was hit to the infield. I want to say shortstop. The batter's bat came around, contacted the catcher. The plate umpire said that's backswing interference, and luckily play did not stop. The batter runner ran to first. They made the play, and there was no issue. Guys, that's not interference. It's not bat swing. It's nothing, okay? Unless we have a situation where a batter hits the ball maybe out in front of home plate. The catcher goes down because he's hit with the batter. He's unable to make a play on that ball. then in that case we would call that interference based on the contact that he made. He did not allow that catcher to make a play on it. Okay, so let's just make sure if those two things happen, it's not backswing interference. All right. Last thing I want to cover as far as observations go, and I'm going to use a quote that actually George DeRoches put on, I think, the Central Hub last week, and I really like it. We want our umpires to show energy and passion, making movements on the field that are crisp and sharp. Let's think about that, guys. That's really what we want to see from you. And the large percentage of you guys are doing that. But we want you guys to move with a purpose, hustle, look engaged, and show that you want to be out there. I am seeing guys that are walking on the field, just kind of gliding out there. I'm not saying you're going to sprint and make a mockery of the game and over-hustle, because that doesn't look good either. Let's make sure we're not walking on the field in between innings, because people are noticing. And guys, I know you all are working hard out there. I don't want a coach, an administrator, an evaluator to look at an umpire and think that he's lazy or that he doesn't want to be there, when I know that that's not the case. But that lack of hustle and energy and passion for the game, it shows, and that's the first thing that people are going to think of you when you're not hustling. So if you're that guy, guys, let's just work harder. That's all. It's a long season. It's a grind, and I don't think it's that much to ask, but let's just think about how you're projecting yourself out there. And let's just stop the walking. I think that's pretty easy to fix. Alex, did you have any observations or anything that you've noticed or anything you want to touch on?
No, I just, guys, Chris said it pretty gently in terms of the talking on the field. I mean, if we weren't on a conference call with 100 people and I had some of you guys one-on-one, I mean, my message would be very short and probably pretty vulgar in terms of how I describe shutting your mouth. But just think of that in the back of your head. Just keep your mouth shut. I mean, if there's a question to answer, something to do, but we get ourselves, and look, there's no one more guilty than me at times in my career, but we get ourselves in more trouble with our mouths as umpires. And just try to have a filter. Try to think about what you're saying before you say it. Is it the right time to say it in a situation? Is it the right time to say it ever? And just, if it's replaying what you're going to say in your head before you say it, that's something that's helped me a little bit, in the last few years. So, and like I said, no one's guilty as getting in trouble with their mouth as I am. So just think of it, and it's just one of those things. We're going to make enough mistakes, ball strike, safe out, that are going to be criticized. We don't then want to be criticized for something we can actually control. So that's my biggest observation there. And then also just in terms of, and this isn't speaking appropriately or inappropriately, but if you don't know the answer to a question regarding a suspension, regarding whether a game is tied, halted, regulation, has to revert back, if you don't know answers to questions like that when a coach asks you, don't give them the wrong answer. If there's a question like that the gameplay on the field is not affected by, and you don't know the answer, just say that. So, we've stopped playing for the night, and there's a score, and someone asks you, hey, does it revert back? Well, nothing on the field is going to be affected by that. So it's okay to say to them, hey, I don't know. We're going to look it up in the book. We're going to give you our answer, but you need to consult with your coordinator and with the commissioner. So not only is it about on the field, not over fraternizing and things like that, but when you don't know the answer to a question and you don't need to know the answer, don't be afraid to say, hey, I've got to go look this up. The game's over. We're going to let you know later, because Chris and I get more phone calls that are like, hey, the umpire told me it was a 5-game suspension when it's really 2, or the umpire told me the game was halted and we had to pick it up and it really reverts back. And that just creates garbage on top of, all the work that we have to do on a regular basis. So think about all those things when it comes to opening your mouth and how you're portraying yourself. So I will very quickly just talk about summer baseball. I sent out some emails regarding the New England League and the New York League in the last couple days, actually last night. The NECBL will be 3-man still. It's going to be 130 a guy this year. The New York Collegiate League will be 2-man at 137 this year. Those are both increases from last year, and you guys should have quite a bit of information on both of those leagues that has been sent out. If you're someone who's on this call and wants information on either one of those leagues and did not receive it via email last night, simply send me an email and I will be happy to get back with you. As we always have with those two leagues, we take requests. So I send the whole schedule out and I ask you to come back to me and say, this is when I want to work, this is who I want to work with, this is what I want to do. And for the most part, we honor those. Obviously, Chris and I could send in the date, and not everybody can work the same date at the same time. So if we have double requests, we do the best we can. So if you just send that stuff to me and you can copy Chris, anything related to those two leagues over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll collect the data, and then hopefully by the end of April, we're able to put out a schedule so that you guys can have your summers planned and make arrangements for any other leagues that you may work, and go from there. Camps this year for the summer, we'll do, looks like 3 camps. We're going to do 1 3-man camp at Bard College this year. It's going to be June 24th to the 30th. And we have a really large tournament going on in association with that. And we also have secured housing on Bard's campus and be using their field, which for those of you that don't know it, that's one of the nicest fields in the Northeast, beautiful turf field. So we have their facility, we have their housing, so it's really a very good situation for us with a full classroom with AV, just steps from the field. So we really wanted to put that on as our kind of marquee 3-man event this summer. And then around that, we will have 2 2-man events, one in Rochester in mid to late July and one in New Jersey the same weekend. We kind of always have that right after the 4th of July. So obviously different levels for different camps. Those guys who are working Division III, Division II, and looking to get on the D1 radar, obviously those 3-man camps, and guys who are working JUCO, looking to move up, guys who are aspiring high school guys, we're looking to showcase and get them going in the 2-man. So, and we ask kind of all you guys, encourage people around you who aren't working college baseball to get involved. This is how you get involved. This is how we start to, fill the bottom. I mean, a lot of you guys have come to us as high school and JUCO umpires and are now working D1. And if we don't keep replenishing the JUCO umpires and the high school umpires and the D3 umpires, it kind of leaves a void. So the more you guys can do to encourage people around you who may not have had the same success or may not be on the same level as you to continue to try to improve and get to camps. The 2-man stuff is really, really important, especially as we start to assign more and more baseball in 2-man. And then as we kind of go through the summer, we'll start to give you guys some more information on the fall. We'll have 2 weeks in Florida again, as we always do in 3-man with a bunch of weekend camps and probably a 4-man along the way somewhere. So certainly looking at all of that, but just wanted to put those on your radar. And the 2 2-man camps and the camp at Bard, the 3-man, we should have registration up on those by April 25th, if not sooner. So all that stuff will be there for you. I think that's all I've got on that, Chris.
Yeah, guys, I think that's about it for tonight. Ran through a lot of stuff, and I know some of these, I was thinking about this today, putting the agenda together. I know some of these calls and evaluations seem like a lot of negative things or things that, we need to be getting better at. But I certainly want to highlight the fact that you guys are doing a good job. I mean, I've seen evaluations and for the most part, a large percentage, if not most of them, are really positive. And you guys are working hard. You guys are doing the job out there and doing what we ask. And I want to applaud you guys for that. So just keep up the good work. I think, we're somewhere around midpoint or maybe a little bit past midpoint, which is crazy in my mind that we're almost halfway through the season. So just keep it going, guys. Keep working hard. Keep doing the job. If you have any issues, contact Alex or myself, and just keep doing what we're doing. We're very happy with that. So to that, that's it for tonight. Thanks for coming on the phone call. And I believe, Alex, we have the NJAC guys coming up right after.
Yeah, guys, we'll have like a 5-minute break here. Guys who are working NJAC, New Jersey Athletic Conference games, I would ask that you stay on the phone. If you are working NJAC non-conference, you certainly can stay on. And, anyone's really welcome to stay on. But the guys I really need and the guys this really pertains to are the guys working NJAC conference games. So it'll be it's the same number. I will not end this call. So you guys can just stay on the line if you're staying on. But we will take like a 4 or 5 minute break to do a transition. If you do fall off, it's the same dial-in to get back on. So we'll start the NJAC meeting about 8:45. So talk to you guys. Those of you signing off, we'll talk to you soon. And for the rest of you guys, we will be back in 3 or 4 minutes here.
Thanks, guys. Good night.